Welcome to The Explainer. So, what's the difference between a UN peacekeeper and just another soldier? I mean, what stops them from just becoming part of the fight? Well, it all comes down to a few core principles. Today, we're going to dig into the actual blueprint, the rule book the blue helmets follow to try and bring peace to some of the world's most dangerous places. Okay, so here's the plan. We'll start with the big picture, then dive right into those three core principles. After that, we'll look at what it takes to make peace actually stick. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the bottom line. Let's do it. All right, so when you see the UN heading into a conflict zone, you've got to understand. It's not just about sending in a bunch of soldiers. Nope. Every single move they make is guided by a very specific, very crucial blueprint for peace. And at the heart of that blueprint are three unshakable principles. These are the things that really truly separate a UN peacekeeper from any other soldier out there. It's their core identity, what makes a blue helmet a blue helmet. Okay, let's get into it. The three core principles, the unbreakable rules of engagement. So what are they? Well, every single UN mission, I don't care if it's monitoring a simple ceasefire or protecting thousands of civilians, it all rests on these three pillars. Right, here they are. First, you've got consent to the parties. Second, impartiality. And third, the non-use of force. Except, and this is a big except, in self-defense and defense of the mandate. Okay, let's break these down one by one. First up, consent. And look, this one's a total deal breaker. UN peacekeeping operations aren't an invasion force. They have to be invited in. They only deploy if the main parties involved in the conflict actually give them permission. They just can't force their way in. So why is this consent thing so crucial? Well, think about it. It gives the peacekeepers the freedom both politically and physically to actually move around and do their jobs. Without that permission, they just become another side in the conflict. And let's be real, in today's world, with these super messy internal conflicts, with dozens of different armed groups, getting and keeping that consent is a massive, massive challenge. And this slide really hits on a key difference you need to understand. Peacekeeping deploys with consent. It's about maintaining stability. But peace enforcement, that's a totally different animal. That's when action is taken without consent, usually to enforce a specific resolution. We're talking about two completely different kinds of missions here. Okay, on to principle number 2, impartiality. Now this is a tricky one. Being impartial doesn't mean you're just a passive bystander or completely neutral to what's happening. No, it means you don't take sides. You have to be seen as fair, open, and transparent in everything you do. It's all about building and keeping trust with everybody involved. And believe me, impartiality gets tested in the real world. Take the UN mission in Mali, for instance. When they had to withdraw, they were facing extreme security challenges. It was incredibly dangerous. But they made a point to do it with, and I quote, full transparency and impartiality. It just goes to show you, this principle isn't some nice idea for peacetime. It's an absolutely essential guide when things get tough. And that brings us to our third and final core principle, the non-use of force. Honestly, this might be the biggest thing that separates a peacekeeper from a regular soldier. For them, using force is always the absolute last resort. It is never, ever the first option. But, and this is a really important but, that doesn't mean they're helpless. The rules allow for some critical exceptions. They can use force for self-defense, to protect themselves or other UN personnel, and, even more importantly, for defense of the mandate. So if the Security Council authorizes it, peacekeepers can use all necessary means to protect civilians or to make sure their mission can get done. It's a huge responsibility. Okay, so we've got the blueprint, right? The three principles. But just having the plans isn't enough to actually build the house. To make peace stick, to make it last, a mission has to get out there and earn trust and support from the local community. That's how it really works. So how do they do that? Well, it really boils down to three key success factors: legitimacy, credibility, and promoting national and local ownership. Let's start with legitimacy. You can think of this in two ways. First, there's the official legitimacy. It comes straight from the UN Charter, from international law. It's the mission's right, its legal and moral authority to even be there. But that's just on paper. The other half of legitimacy, and maybe the more important half, is what happens on the ground. It's something that has to be earned every single day through the actions of every single peacekeeper.
We're talking about maintaining super high standards of professionalism, respecting local customs, and having an absolute zero-tolerance policy for abuse. And that leads us right into the next point, credibility. This is all about being seen as believable, as worthy of trust. It's the big question. Does everyone, from the local villagers to the international community, actually believe that this UN mission can get the job done?
So how do you build that credibility? Well, you have to be realistic. You need a clear and, most importantly, achievable mandate. You need to have the right resources to actually do the job. And this one is huge. You have to communicate clearly and manage people's expectations. Because let me tell you, nothing kills credibility faster than over-promising and under-delivering. And finally, we come to what might be the single most important factor of all, national and local ownership. This is the fundamental idea that you can't just import peace. You can't force it on people. A lasting peace has to be built from the ground up, and it has to be owned by the local people themselves.
There's a quote that just says it all, really. A UN peacekeeping mission cannot want stability and peace more than the local people and national partners do. I mean, think about that. The UN's role is to help, to support, to be a partner. But they can't be the main ones driving the change. That has to come from within.
All right, so we've looked at the blueprint and we've looked at what it takes to actually build something with it. Let's bring it all home. What's the bottom line?
Here's probably the easiest way to think about all this. Those 3 principles we started with, consent, impartiality, and non-use of force, that's the what. That's the blueprint, the definition of peacekeeping. But those success factors, legitimacy, credibility, and ownership, that's the how. That's how you actually take the blueprint and build a lasting peace.
And it's that combination, a really strict rulebook on one hand and a deep focus on local partnership on the other, that makes UN peacekeeping so unique. It's a powerful tool for peace, but it does leave us with a pretty big question for today, doesn't it? In an era where conflicts are getting more and more complex, are these foundational principles more important than ever, or are they facing their greatest test yet?